So let's take a couple of deep breaths and get centered and bring our attention inward. And you can gently soften your gaze or gently close your eyes. And those first couple of deep breaths really help us relax. They sends that signal to the brain to relax. So softening the belly, keeping the shoulders relaxed. Maybe just doing a scan of the body and noticing any areas that are a little tight. Breathing into those areas. Checking your shoulders, your jaw muscle, softening your belly, and keeping your face muscles relaxed. And letting go of the day. Sometimes when we begin our set, the mind is still racing through the day. So with these couple of extra deep breaths, we can just really settle into the body, releasing those areas that have tightened up. And as the thoughts do come into our mind, we can just acknowledge that we're having a thought. We don't need to get wrapped up in the story. We can just say, thinking mind, come back to the breath, come back to the body, following the breath all the way in and all the way out. Noticing the lungs expand and contract as the body breathes naturally. And it creates a natural rhythm that we can follow. And you may want to just notice how much more calm the body is now that we've sat a few moments, noticing how the breath has slowed down a bit. And we're just arriving here in this group, allowing yourself this time for you, just to relax, just to gather yourself together, letting go of the day. Maybe doing another scan of the body. See if we can let go just a bit more, feeling a little heavier in our seat, sinking a little deeper into the cushion, into that deep relaxation. And staying with the rhythm of the breath, just arriving here now with this group. So when you're ready, just coming back to the group, fluttering your eyes open. I know that there are a couple of people who have been trying to get on. I've got messages from them, so I'll let them in when they do succeed. But in the meantime, welcome everyone. So glad to see you all here. For those who don't know me well, my name is Joni Lane, and I am the director and the Dharma leader here at a Positive Light Meditation Center in Kelseyville, California. So now let me introduce our special guest teacher, Walt Opie. Walt is a Buddhist teacher in the Insight Meditation tradition. He teaches regularly at Sacramento Insight Meditation and at other centers throughout the US, including Spirit Rock and the Insight Meditation Society. He was trained to teach through the Insight Meditation Society Retreat Teacher Training Program and the Spirit Rock Community Dharma Leaders Program. Walt has led sitting groups specifically for people in addiction recovery since 2011. He also served as a volunteer facilitator in a California prison for many years. Walt likes to emphasize the teachings of early Buddhism, and two of his most influential teachers are Bhikkhu Analayo and Joseph Goldstein. He lives in Berkeley with his wife and daughter, and you can visit his website at waltopie.com, which I did put in the chat. And tonight, Walt will be speaking on applying the Four Noble Truths to our life. Great topic. So welcome, Walt, and thank you for leading tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Joni, for that wonderful introduction, and I really enjoyed the meditation. I say we just meditate for 40 more minutes. uh, that's the best solution to the Four Noble, the suffering anyway. Yeah, so I'm happy to be here with you all, and hope it's not too miserably hot where you are. I'm in Berkeley, so I can't complain, but it's warmer than usual even in Berkeley. Yeah, so I love the Four Noble Truths. It's been a topic that I come back to quite often, and it is considered really, it was sort of officially the Buddha's first teaching was on the Four Noble Truths to the five disciples. And I'm gonna try to talk about the practical applications of working with it more than tell the whole story of the Four Noble Truths and get into too much detail because I don't have a whole lot of time here. But I think I'll start with a quote from the Dhammapada that I find useful, which Dhammapada is an early Buddhist text. And it says, if by giving up a lesser happiness, one could experience greater happiness, a wise person would renounce the lesser to behold the greater. I kind of find that to be a guiding principle because we tend to be very habituated to go for those sort of lesser happinesses, right? That's kind of what our culture points us to. And the Buddha pointed us to this greater happiness that we can strive for, work towards with our practice, mindfulness, meditation, learning the wisdom teachings, wisdom and compassion teachings of the Buddha, that kind of stuff. So that's just a good guiding principle that I use. I'm assuming most of us have a general idea of what the Four Noble Truths are. We've covered this topic before. Well, the short version is that the first noble truth is kind of about the origin of suffering or dukkha. And the word dukkha is what we usually translate as suffering. The dukkha is to be fully understood, and suffering is to be fully understood. The word dukkha, even in the Pali dictionary, I looked it up, says there's no one word in English covering the same ground as dukkha does in the Pali, the original Indian language, closest to what the Buddha spoke. But dukkha is one definition. It's the opposite of ease. So it's dis-ease. But in English, we would say, there's no, dis-ease isn't really a word. So we have disease, but it means something else. And it's also the opposite of well-being, which you could say was illness, but we have a different, illness in English means being sick. So it's funny how somehow English isn't set up to perfectly define dukkha in one word. And it also, this is interesting. It says dukkha is equally mental and physical. So the word pain is too predominantly physical, and the word sorrow is too exclusively mental. So then Joseph Goldstein says, in many ways, the term dukkha defines the entire spiritual path, because the Buddha often said that all conditioned phenomena are dukkha, and that out of his vast and limitless knowledge, the Buddha teaches only this dukkha and its end, um, which is usually suffering at its end. And then Joseph says the problem is there's no single word that fully captures the range of meanings, because dukkha could be a little tiny agitation, or it could be the worst catastrophe you can imagine going on. It can kind of cover a huge range. Uh, so then one word that several of my teachers seem to prefer is unsatisfactoriness, because another teacher calls it stressful, stress. Dukkha is stress, or unreliability. So anyway, this is just to try to get a flavor of it. Incapable of giving lasting satisfaction is kind of a phrase. So anyway, this is the first noble truth. It's about dukkha, that there is dukkha, not that all life is dukkha exactly, but that there will be dukkha in life. And the Buddha kind of put it this way: birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, illness is dukkha, death is dukkha, union with what is displeasing is dukkha, separation from what is pleasing is dukkha, not to get what one wants is dukkha. So, and anything we cling to is dukkha, anything that's subject to clinging. So then the second noble truth is around the end of, is the cause of dukkha, I'm sorry. And the word here is tanha in Pali, or crave. We usually define it as craving, or my favorite is the fever of unsatisfied longing. um, so what's interesting is the second noble truth is craving, which is to be abandoned. So the suffering is to be fully understood, and then the craving, which is the origin of suffering, is to be abandoned. And then the third truth is the truth of the end of suffering, the end of dukkha, which is to be realized. And then the fourth noble truth is a path, the Noble Eightfold Path, which is to be developed, which includes, things like right view, right intention, right morality, and then right mindfulness and right concentration. So we develop the path. Now, what's interesting is that this is believed to all follow an ancient, medical diagnosis, an ancient Indian scheme of medical diagnosis, according to Bhikkhu Analayo, a famous German scholar. And so I find this useful. So the scheme proceeds by first diagnosing the dis-ease, right? The dukkha, followed by identifying the pathogen responsible for the dis-ease, which is the craving. And in the same vein, the potential of recovering health leads on to identifying the required cure, which is cessation of craving, letting go of the craving, dispassion towards the craving, and the resultant correlations. And then the cure is also the cultivation of the Noble Eightfold Path. So what I find interesting is that to apply this in our lives, it actually kind of works. And that was, so I was on a retreat once, and I met with this teacher. I have to admit, it's one of those classic scenarios where there was a senior teacher that I was very excited to meet with, and then I had to meet with some new teacher like me, who I didn't know that well. And then I had an interesting meeting with that new teacher, but then we ran out of time, and he sort of ended the session because he didn't want to go off schedule or something. And I didn't feel like he fully understood my issue that I was trying to explain to him. And so then I went back to my dorm room, and I was really, but he did tell me something useful, but now I don't remember the details. But the bottom line is I went back to my dorm room and was sitting on the bed contemplating what had just happened. And I realized, oh, I'm really suffering over this. This is some dukkha because I feel like he didn't give me enough time and he didn't understand me, yada, yada. And then I realized, oh, well, if I apply the Four Noble Truths, there is dukkha that's arisen because something happened that I didn't want to happen. And then, but I have craving, and I can look at what am I craving here? I'm craving for, I was craving for things to be different than they were and for him to understand me better, whatever it was. But then I kind of realized, well, wait, what if I'm craving that, rather than wishing things to be different, I realized, well, what if I just accept that what he did offer me might be useful? And then I can't remember what it was, but because I guess I was dismissing whatever he told me. So then I kind of calmed down and I said, okay, wait, maybe what he said was useful. And so then I thought about it and I let go of my craving for having been given some other solution. Long story short, I was able to let go of the craving for it to be different, apply what he did offer, and then realized that it worked just fine and that there was no problem. um, and so, but it was a mindfulness that allowed me to do that. So it was the fact that I was on the path working these things through. That's maybe not the strongest example I could have given, but that was the time when I realized, oh, you can use the Four Noble Truths to actually address your suffering. And I've done it plenty of other times. That was just the very first time that it really occurred to me that that works. And then I also have done a lot of research on craving, because if craving is the cause of suffering, then what's going on there? In modern neuroscience, there were some scientists who discovered that when they studied lab rats, because you can't hook up human brains, the way you can't. I mean, I don't even want to know exactly how they measure the brains of lab rats, um, but anyway, they found that when the rat was caught in wanting something, it fired a bigger part of their brain and was like harder to disrupt than when they were liking something. So then whatever it was that they were desiring when they got it, say they just wanted sugar, then when they got the sugar, the pleasure part fired a much smaller part of the brain and was very easily disrupted. So the brain is wired for desire, is sometimes what they say, wired for the wanting, and because that drives us to do what we need to do to get the thing, right? And that for survival, that can be useful. But in the modern world, we kind of gets misused. So I've found it helpful to understand that my brain is kind of built to be what one scientist described as an insatiable wanting machine. So we're kind of walking around with an insatiable wanting machine to some extent or other. I mean, I'm a recovering alcoholic addict, so maybe my insatiable wanting machine had some misfunction or is overdeveloped. I'm not sure, but anyway, the solution that has worked the best for me is this practice, the mindfulness. I mean, literally in front of my desk at all times, I have this sticker, that I got at a monastery in Burma. I thought it was funny that I went all the way to Burma to practice with one of my favorite teachers, Sayadaw U Tejaniya, who's a famous teacher of, awareness or mindfulness. And all around the monastery, they had bumper stickers plastered, "Be mindful," which is just kind of funny that somehow. But it turns out we need a lot of reminders, right? Because practicing mindfulness isn't so difficult, but remembering to practice mindfulness is very difficult because we are easily distracted, let's just say. So there's a lot, that modern science has done around studying all this, and we don't have time to go into it so much. But what we can do is start to develop awareness of our well, Dr. Judson Brewer talks about a three-step process that we can use to reduce craving. And step one is developing awareness of our habit loops. Through specific mindfulness practices, we can map out the triggers, behaviors, and results of the habits that we may want to change and see them clearly rather than mindlessly repeating them without thinking. So if we just, one teacher said we're always practicing something. So either we're just kind of stuck in our old habits, or we can reprogram ourselves through mindfulness, um, and start noticing what are my habit patterns and what triggers them, and the you know, and we can start to bring awareness to this. And he says is really examining the result of the habit. Um, one thing is we need to say, what do I get from this? Is it actually rewarding? Um, his example tends to be smoking. So you need to examine the results of the habit, and then you can actually reprogram the part of your brain that mistakes uh, overeating, excessive worrying, procrastinating, smoking, or any other unwanted behavior as a positive thing. So the brain is seeing it as a positive thing when we're caught in the, so it's working for us on some level until, but at some point we realize that maybe it's not working so well and we're actually causing ourselves more harm than good, right? And so then lastly, step three is finding what he calls a BBO, or a bigger, better offer that's more rewarding than the habit you want to change. So rather than using sugar or smoking or something else to make you feel good or control your anxiety, you can tap into your always available, extremely rewarding natural reserves of curiosity to eliminate the old habit at the source, he says. But for me, the bigger, better offer comes through the practice of meditation and mindfulness. And that's because um, we can start tapping into this wholesome type of joy that the practice brings. And for me, has become the bigger, better offer. And also we can start to cultivate a real sense of well-being in our lives. And I know for me, I was once on a long retreat at Spirit Rock, like the 2 month retreat, and I was kind of hiking in the hills by myself, deep into the retreat. And all of a sudden, I kind of stopped. It was a beautiful day, and I was in a very good mood. And I just realized, wait, like that there's some unusual feeling here. What is that? And I realized it was the feeling of deep well-being. I wasn't used to that, but I had, just through cultivating such a healthy lifestyle on the retreat, eating nutritious food, not eating a lot of sugar, like not harming, not getting into gossip or unhelpful speech. So I was actually practicing the Noble Eightfold Path very diligently on this retreat, and had been in my life for some time at that point. But I just had this experience of deep well-being, that and a lot of peace, and mental peace, and even physical peace, I guess you could say. But that's a real benefit of the practice that we need to take in. The Buddha would say that we have to be mindful of this as well. When we feel like a deep sense of well-being, notice what conditions brought that into being. Because I also, at some earlier point in my life, had really created the conditions for total disaster, right? I was, um, you know, things were things were pretty bad before they went the other direction, right? And so this and we can get, one of my teachers says when we're really practicing mindfulness, like we did at the beginning here through Joni's instructions, when we really just connect with the breath, settle the body, start to settle the mind, we can have what he calls, Venerable Analayo calls the subtle joy of being in the present moment. And it might be very subtle at first, but as we keep practicing, it tends to grow. Like we tend to get a stronger connection to it. And that this is one of the the higher happinesses we can start working with. Like it gives us something to get us back to the cushion every day or whatever it is. And then ultimately we can cultivate a real peace of mind and, like I said, sense of well-being over time as we follow the Noble Eightfold Path that we talked about. I mean, there's should probably wrap it up here. There's but here I'll end on this. This is a quote from my teacher in Burma, Sayadaw U Tejaniya, who said, "Only when there is true understanding where will there be real happiness. Not the kind of happiness people want to indulge in, but a happiness that arises because you are at peace with the way things are. You're at peace with the way things are. So you're not craving for things to be different than they are." And that is really the end of craving, is when we can just be okay with the way things are. That doesn't mean we don't change, like change things that need to be changed, but in general, we found peace with the way things are. We're not craving it to be different. So those are a few thoughts. Thank you for your kind attention. I think I need to end there, but we can take some questions later. Boy, there's much more that we could say. Hopefully that offered something useful. All right, so we'll meditate some more and practice what I was talking about. So just finding a comfortable posture. And it's helpful, if you're sitting, you do want to have a fairly straight and alert posture, but whatever works for you in this moment for your body is fine. And then just maybe taking a deep breath or two as we begin. I find that taking a deep breath just kind of helps me arrive more fully in this body and in this present moment. And just noticing there is this body sitting here, or whatever posture you may be in. Often we're kind of in the imaginary control tower up in our heads. So with the meditation, it's a real invitation to drop into a sense of embodiment, get grounded in the contact of the body with the chair or cushion, feel the hands, feel the feet, feel the arms. And as Joni mentioned earlier, you could do a short body scan starting at the top of the head, relaxing, softening around the eyes, relaxing the muscles in the face, dropping the shoulders, softening the belly, relaxing the arms and the legs. And you might reconnect with the breath. At this point, breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. breathing out. I know I'm breathing out. Just continuing to allow the body to settle and the mind to settle, aware of sounds arising and passing away, but kind of leaving sound in the background for now. And aware of the thoughts arising and passing away too. See if you can be the knower of the thoughts rather than being so identified with each thought. A thought is just a thought. And as we practice remembering to be kind, compassionate towards ourselves. If anything difficult, painful, stressful arises, meet it with kindness and care. Just notice it's there, give it space. This is part of, learning how to work with the First Noble Truth. Part of it is that there's the two arrows. The first arrow we can't avoid. There will be, painful things in life that we can't avoid. But the second arrow is the one that we kind of shoot into ourselves, where we're wishing the first arrow hadn't happened, having some reactivity towards it. That doesn't tend to help. So we try to let that second arrow stay in its quill, I guess. Don't pull it out. Let it go. Back to the next breath. Stay connected to the sense of the body sitting here. Notice if there's any even subtle joy of being in the present moment, or just a contentment when we can accept this moment is like this without needing it to be different than it is. So the craving is impermanent, it arises, but it also fades away. The third noble truth is about letting the craving just fade away without getting caught in it. It is possible to let the craving fade away, not feeding it, meeting it with mindfulness. And this brings real peace. In the meantime, we get distracted pretty easily, forget to be mindful. So just having compassion for yourself if that happens, it's not a problem. It's totally normal. Come back to the next breath when you get lost in thought. And again, just checking in. Notice if you're being mindful, staying present with the breath and the sense of this body sitting here. Sometimes labeling thoughts is helpful. Noticing we were just planning something for later tonight or tomorrow. Call that planning. Or we were judging something, judging, remembering a story from earlier today or yesterday. I call that remembering. Let go of the thinking, come back to the next breath. Proximate cause of mindfulness is mindfulness. So one mindful moment conditions the next. That's why we just breathe in, knowing we're breathing in, breathe out, knowing we're breathing out. Again, just checking in. Notice if you're lost in a story or a plan. See if you can come back to the next breath. We can always begin again with meditation. And see if you can connect with that subtle joy of being in the present moment. Or even the joy of connecting with what one teacher called the one who knows, the awareness itself, rather than lost in the contents of our thinking, the thoughts, resting in the knowing itself. Requires a certain letting go of craving, letting go of clinging, and allowing things to be as they are. Kind of a non-interfering, looking on without interfering. And just remembering the practice does require just enough effort to stay present, awake, aware. If you start to get sleepy, you can always open your eyes, take some deeper breaths, sit up straighter. Just a couple more minutes. Another thing about craving, when we're caught in that fever of unsatisfied longing, craving, is that it's an agitation in the mind, right? So just it is a type of suffering. So with mindfulness, we can lose interest in being caught in this craving, let it fade away, let it cease. And it's said that this brings a coolness to the mind. Coolness to the mind and the heart, this fading away of craving, letting it go. And I'll ring the bell in just a minute. I wanted to read a short quote before I close here. It's from Wes Nisker, one of my favorite Dharma teachers who passed away last year. Um, he had a sense of humor, which is one thing I loved about him. So he writes, as strange as it sounds, meditation may reveal that we are happier than we thought we were. We may discover that ancient conditioning, rather than present circumstances, is causing our dissatisfaction, and that this moment is quite sufficient or even wonderful, and we simply hadn't noticed. This moment is quite sufficient or even wonderful, and we simply hadn't noticed. Okay. All right. Thank you. So that ends the meditation.
That was lovely, Walt. Thank you so much. Wonderful meditation.
Great. You're welcome. Yeah, and so if you want, I can take a few questions if anybody has any. I mean, there's a lot more we could say about the Four Noble Truths, but that was a quick overview. Or sharing too, if anybody wants to share anything.
Hi, thank you, Walt. This is Rob.
Hey, Rob.
I loved all of that. Thank you. I keep coming back to this question. I think Joni's probably heard me ask it before, but how do you separate the the unhealthy longings from the healthy ones? I keep coming to the serenity prayer, which sort of approaches that quandary, but I'm wondering what your take is on that.
Yeah, great question. I mean, yeah, this is one of the topics I would have loved to have had more time to get into. Um, well, there's this great, there's a great sutta called Two Kinds of Thought. It's from the Middle Length Discourses, number 19. But basically, the Buddha realized that he had two different kinds of thought. Like he could put all of his thoughts into two categories, which we might call wholesome and unwholesome. Um, but more importantly, it was kind of like those that were beneficial and skillful, and those that take us away from uh, what's beneficial and skillful. So, and sensual desires he puts in the unskillful, unbeneficial. So a lot of our thoughts are about, like what I call for myself, future. I'm always planning future pleasant experiences, right? Future pleasant sensual experiences, like this meditation's great, but I can't wait to go get some ice cream later, or whatever it is. Sorry to, I hope I'm not triggering anybody, but you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. Or I'm going to watch this show on Netflix or whatever it is. Um, but those things take us out of the present moment, right? And we're just, and so, and also on the Buddhist path, it's all about non-harming and, generosity, kindness for ourselves, kindness for others. So the Buddha kind of looked at the thoughts, any thought like that is wholesome and beneficial. And then the thoughts that were unwholesome are kind of caught up in greed, some kind of greed, some kind of uh, aversion or ill will, and some kind of delusion. So that's generally how it goes. And there is a desire for awakening, a desire to do positive things in the world and to be, cultivate well-being. So those are considered beneficial. So there are wholesome desires, just to say. There's even a Pali word, because I keep mentioning Pali, chanda, chanda, is like wholesome desire. So I don't know if that helps. I mean, if you had any specific example you want to give me, I can try to drill down too, if that's useful.
Well, yeah, a couple, I guess they've been tricky for me, but, wanting to be healthy, or when you're not, wanting love in your life if you don't have any, those types of things can have two sides to them as well, I suppose.
Yep, definitely. I mean, the Buddha, it's interesting because, the story of the Buddha's enlightenment is he was, before he became, quote, enlightened, he was willing to kind of try anything, right? Because he wanted to be free of dukkha, because he had kind of named this dukkha in the world and wanted to find the end of it, the end of suffering. So one of the things he tried was like not eating. He was eating something like 2 grains of rice a day, right? And supposedly he could like put a finger into his belly and touch his backbone, or something like he just was skin and bones. And he had this memory of meditating under a rose apple tree when he was a boy and having a pleasant meditative experience. And he realized that there was nothing unbeneficial about that pleasant meditative experience, that it was totally wholesome and fine. And then somehow that allowed him to think, well, probably eating is okay too, because it's nourishing the body. So he realized that starving himself to death was kind of a waste of time. And so he started taking care of the body and eating nourishing food again. And the 5 buddies that he was practicing with were appalled when they saw him taking rice porridge, which I heard one teacher liken to, like, in the modern day, it would be like suddenly he's eating Ben and Jerry's ice cream or something. That's how they saw it. It's like, this guy's decadent. So anyway, it was totally, that ended up leading him all the way to enlightenment. Like, that was part of turning his course around. So taking care of himself wasn't considered a bad thing at all. And then also he talked about Sangha, community, and the famous quote is that his attendant said that he told somebody else that community is half of the holy life, half of being on the spiritual path. And then the Buddha corrected him and said, no, community is the whole of the holy life. That it's very important, of the utmost importance. So it's totally natural that we do want to be connected to other people. But we just have to make sure that we're wanting to do it, for wholesome reasons, right? Like, and also the last thing I would say is that the Buddha also said, be an island unto yourself, be a refuge unto yourself. So that's also the practice gives us a way to kind of connect with ourselves when there's nobody else around. There's still a way where we can be there for ourselves that I personally have found very wonderful, very useful in my own life. I mean, I do have a family or whatever, but I'm very happy when I'm alone too. Like that 2 month retreat, you're kind of alone for 2 months. And I actually was able to cultivate a real sense of well-being, even though I missed people at times, but overall it was a lot of well-being. I hope that's helpful. I mean, and life is hard, right? It's hard to be a human, and all these. That's why we also have to have a lot of compassion for ourselves. Yeah.
And thank you again, Walt, for being here and sharing your wisdom.
Take care, everybody.
Alrighty. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.